recently I decided to completely revamp my CV because, well, you know why. I don't know about you, but I find this task to be quite laborious. Oh, that's a great word, man, isn't it? Well done, Jack. Laborious. I find this task to be quite time-consuming, quite boring, and it's not something that I particularly enjoy. So I spent a bunch of time doing it, mainly because I didn't want to come back and do it anytime soon. I did a bunch of research and decided that I'd been making some fundamental mistakes over the years, and the likelihood is that you watching this are probably making those same mistakes. So in this video, we're going to talk about the main ways that you are probably messing up your CV and how you can transform it to that next level. I'm not going to make this video particularly long because I don't think it needs to be. I'm going to split this into two sections. We're going to start talking about the formatting issues that I had, and then we're going to go on to the content of your CV, which is obviously the main thing, and then we'll do a little conclusion. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so starting with format, the first mistake I was making, and you are probably making, is that my CV was far too long. My CV was 2.5 to 3 pages. And now you have to bear in mind that I've only been working in the corporate world for the last 4 to 5 years, so I haven't got a huge amount of experience by any means. And from the research that I did, generally people recommend that you keep your CV to 1 page. So this is the first thing I did. I decided to cut out all the unnecessary content and made my CV into a 1-pager. This seems quite simple, but it was actually very difficult because it was difficult to decide on what I wanted to include for each of my past roles. So you may find this to be quite tricky. I don't think it matters too much if you go to 1.5, 2 pages, but for me, I quite enjoyed the challenge of condensing everything I had down to 1 page because it meant that it forced me to think about what I really wanted to highlight on my CV and I guess the key achievements and key projects. The second mistake that I was making is that my education was quite high up the page. Now, generally, the advice for graduates is to do this, but as I've been working for 4 years now, my education is now at the bottom of the page and there's more emphasis on my work experience as opposed to my education. Obviously, if you're a graduate and you haven't got much work experience, then you should put it at the top of the page, and this will allow you to flesh out certain details like relevant modules or dissertation projects, etc. Another thing that I came across when I was researching was all of these like CV template designers with images and really fancy formatting. And from what I could tell from my research on places like Reddit, no recruiter really wants this. I personally wouldn't bother because a lot of the time nowadays you have to paste your CV into a box or you have to import it onto someone's portal. So I just keep mine fairly simple now. I use horizontal lines to split the sections and there's no images or anything like that. Okay, moving on to the content of the CV, which is obviously what matters the most. This is what people are going to read. You should be using bullet points. If you aren't, then I would highly suggest condensing things into bullet points. And now the first mistake that I'd made with regards to the content and the bullet points that I've used to highlight experiences from my roles was that they lacked impact. I found myself asking, yeah, but so what? I'd said I'd worked on a project, I'd said I'd done this, but there was a lot of the time I was waiting for the result, I was waiting for the so what. That was probably the main thing that I noticed from going back through my CV, is that some of my bullet points, not all of them, but some of them lacked real impact and lacked that result. So I ended up structuring my bullet points as follows: the work that I did, why I did the work, and the outcome of that work. An example of this could be as follows: forecasted demands for operational areas during the pandemic. This allowed the business to reduce overheads by 10% or something like that. The second mistake I'd made with regards to the content was that I hadn't focused enough emphasis on the first bullet point. So when I was going back through my roles, a lot of the ordering was off, and the first bullet point should really highlight the main achievement from that role. Pick the main thing that you want someone to read, the main thing that you want someone to know you did, and make sure that that is your first bullet point for the role, because as you read down, it obviously loses its impact. Okay, moving on to the third mistake that I was making is that there was far too much detail for roles that I'd had 3 or 4 years ago. I'd included 3, 4, 5 bullet points for some of these roles, and I don't think that's needed. So now for a role that I was in 4 years ago, I only have 2 bullet points. I have 2 things, 2 achievements that I want someone to know that I did in that role. Another thing is that my bullet points were far too long. Some of them span 3 or 4 lines, and from what I could tell, there is a good length for bullet points, so you should be aiming for 2-3 lines max per bullet point. Another thing, and this is probably for people who work more in the commercial type areas, if you can put numbers to something, you increase turnover by X amount or you reduce costs by X amount, that is really, really good because it's tangible for people, it's easy for them to understand, and it's easy for you to demonstrate the impact of what you did. The final thing that I want to talk about on content, and something that I've told people with interview advice in the past, but for some reason I'd still done in my CV, was I got into the habit of telling people what I'd done, but without showing them. For some examples, I'd fallen into the trap of saying displayed excellent written skills, which, yeah, sounds great, but doesn't really mean anything. What I should have said instead was drafted an official written report covering X topic, and this was published to the public, or something like that. Do you get what I mean? So you need to show people what you've done. Don't just tell them, because if you tell them, then it's almost like, well, how do I know to believe you? If you give them a tangible example, then it's way easier for them to see, oh yeah, they've got really good written skills because they did X. Show people, don't tell them. So that is all I wanted to cover in this video. I'm very confident that if you make these changes, it will transform your CV for the better. Let me know if you think that I missed anything down below. Let me know anything that you struggle with on your CVs. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers.